is an honor and privilege for us to have amongst us Mrs. Justice Ayesha Malik of the Lahore High Court as an honorable chief guest today. Her own struggle and person is an illustration of the dedication and commitment, as well as a model of professional ethos that all young lawyers, male and female, aspire to. We would now like to request her to come and address the audience. Ma'am, please.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. I'm as always happy and privileged to be standing here before everyone discussing a topic that's close to my heart and which I feel very strongly about. Bas isko theek hai, it's fine. I've not been here and was unable due to another commitment to attend the whole day. I don't want to repeat things that everyone has said, but I do want to share with you two important things. One is a little bit of my own experience, and my own experience in sitting where I am today, how society responds to you. So what may seem like an easy thing to do and may seem like gender is something we can all manage very comfortably, it's not. It's not. So if anyone thinks that these are not issues or these are non-issues, or anyone thinks that these are small issues, they are far from the reality, because I think everyone sitting in this room can clearly call themselves a person who has the ability to speak out, to protect themselves, who can voice their opinion, and who can also help to take opinion in some direction. But there are those who can't, and those are the people we want to help, and that for everyone, just to remind you, is half the population. That's the half the population of this country that needs the attention. And as I tell all these young people, that for me, the gender issue is really about space. It's about creating space. And I have a daughter of my own, and I have two sons, and I always tell them, learn to respect your sister's space. That is her space in which we acknowledge that that's her space. She has a right to her own opinion over there, and she has the right to exist in the way she desires in that space. It also means that when I look in the court context, or I look in any other context, that when she is in that context, she should be able to do whatever she needs to do, whether it is to protect herself, whether it is to do her job, whatever she needs to do, she should be able to do it. And this is not only about women, it's at a human level. I mean, I sometimes wonder, why do we have to brand it just for women? It's at a human level. You let people exist, you let them do what they want to do. But we call it gender because there is a gender issue, and gender is often projected in such a way that it requires our attention. So gender sensitivity, when we talk about gender sensitivity, why does it become important? Because when I was elevated, I was the only female judge, and I realized that even though my male counterparts were all very friendly and respectful, there is a very insensitive environment, and that environment doesn't know how to deal with me, doesn't know what to do with me, doesn't on many occasions know how to respond to me. And that I say it not in a negative way, but I say it in a positive way. It doesn't mean that there is that this was because they didn't want to do it or they wanted to be nasty. It's just that they're not used to it, because there are not enough women around in that position, and they're not dealing with women in that position, so they don't know how to respond. And it took a lot of time for people to, even in the courtroom, take me seriously, because they thought, ये तो औरत बैठी हुई है, ये क्या करेगी यहाँ बैठ के, ये क्या बोलेगी, ये किस तरह हमें समझाएगी. But with time, I think I can safely say that I'm probably considered to be one of the toughest judges in the High Court now. So it's not about the gender. It's about your own merit. It's about who you are and how you project yourself. So coming from there, as a judge in the High Court, I realized that we need to start training our judges, and we need to start creating an environment where we are more gender sensitive, where we realize that litigant who comes, who's been abused or who's been victimized or who has a problem, where she feels safe to come and talk about her story. So where do we start? We start by training judges and talking to judges about what it means to be a sensitive judge. And again, I give you examples that really, if you think about it, they're just human examples. That if you see a female in your courtroom, if she has children and she's standing in the corner or she's squashed between men, give her space. create that space and make it a point to tell everyone to give her that space, so that people understand that there's nothing wrong with doing it. It's out of respect. You would do it for your own mother, you would do it for your own sister, please do it for her as well. She's also a respectable member of society, so she needs that space. Or when she is in your court and she's telling her story, make sure that it's told in a manner that's comfortable, that she can say it without worrying that people are listening to her or that someone will harass her. Please don't forget the social context. You have to take the social context with you, and we do have a conservative society. We can't run away from that, and we shouldn't always project that negatively. That's the kind of people who we are. So we have to deal with that. We have to teach that society how to create that space within the norms that are acceptable to them, and that is the challenge. And there's so many of you who are working with that challenge and creating inroads and creating those spaces, which I must say is commendable. It's a great job and it's a great initiative, and it must continue. Where the second aspect of realizing that sensitivity is there is then once you understand what it means to be sensitive, and we say specifically gender sensitive when we talk about courtroom, then it is taking that message and making sure that others are on board with you. They understand what it means to be sensitive. So we have two judicial officers here, and they know that we talk a lot about gender sensitivity, and when we talk about it, we realize that many a times people don't realize that they're being maybe discriminatory. They don't mean to be it. So everything doesn't have to be taken in an offensive manner. Sometimes things are just done and said, and you have to learn to give the appropriate response, and it doesn't always have to be projected in a negative way, because sometimes people are just not used to it. They don't know what the appropriate response is, simply because they've never had to give it. So we worked on that. We worked on talking about crimes against women and how we can improve it, and I'm sure you've heard the judge speak about the gender-based violence initiative. That is a great initiative, and that is one of the first initiatives of its kind which defines the space and has given rules of how cases will be conducted in that space. And I'm happy to say from the data that has been shared with you that it's doing a good job and people are getting used to it. But the challenge now is that all cases that come into that court, even on the part of the lawyers, there is a response to that, the system that's been created, and people realize that that's the only way to do gender-based violence crime, is to give her the ability to say what she has to say, and the other side as well, of course, the ability to say what it has to say, but it to be done in such a manner that the trauma doesn't continue. And I tell you, when you work in this profession and you see how people are affected by trauma, you do realize that it's very difficult. It's very, very difficult, and you get used to it, you hear it all the time, you discuss it all the time, but you don't feel that pain that she has felt. And you don't know what it means to go home and have to deal with it. If you're a rape victim, if you're an abuse victim, you don't know what it means to live with somebody who abuses you. You don't know what it means to live with someone abuse you and watch them abuse your daughter. It's very, very difficult. And it should be bothering everybody. It should bother us as people, because we're all human beings at the end of the day. And if some other human being is being tortured or some other human being is subjected to abuse, it should bother us anyway. The fact that it's a woman means you take her a step up, because she's weak and she's unable to protect herself. She doesn't have a very strong voice, and in many cases she may have no voice at all. So the initiative here is to project and to share with you various different projects that have been taken on by different groups, and the amount of effort that they've put into it, so that more people can join in and do their own bit, whatever that may be. The second part, I think what is important, is to learn and know that every day you learn new things, you learn new ways. And I see it not only as a mother, I see it as a judge, I see it as a Pakistani, that we need to work on our attitudes. We need to work on our attitudes a big deal. So you heard the representative from the UN talk about there being gaps and not enough women in the right jobs. Of course that is a problem. That's a very, very big problem, because somehow they just, you don't see them, you just sort of miss them. But more than that, it's about attitude. First attitude, I would say, would be, how do women treat other women? How do women respond to other women's plight? Do they actually give the kind of response they want themselves? Because for me, that's the test of fairness. Do you behave that way with somebody the way you want that person to behave with you? Do you say those things? Do you comfort them in that way? Do you subject them to that environment that is good for you? If you do, then yes, you've taken some right steps. If you're not doing that, then there is a problem. So it is important to remember that everybody has a role to play, and in that role, all of you, each and every one of you, should know that you are a channel of communication. You are part of the move for change. You are part of the people who are going to make that mindset change, who are going to close that gap, so that the next time she comes up here and she speaks, she says we're not at 143 but we're somewhere at 50 or 60. So that's where we would like to be, and each and every one of you is that agent of change. Whether you do it in your home, whether you do it on the streets, whether you do it in the courtroom, whether you do it in the classroom, but do play a role. Do teach others around you to be more human. So we need to change our attitudes. And when we speak of technology and we speak of all the things that we see, again, an area of great concern to me is the social media and the response that we get, the very sort of, I would say, fast, knee-jerk responses that come on social media. Sometimes they're not fair and they're not nice, and again we lose perspective. Who do we lose perspective of? That person who we're all discussing on social media. We somehow just lose perspective of that person's story, and we lose perspective of that person's issue, and we start discussing it and it becomes a national issue for us, and we've just lost sight of everything. So that's another area that we need to focus on, because we need to educate ourselves. And again, I take it positively, because these things are new to us. Every society has gone through that. It's time for us to go through that as well. And all of you are young. You all have a long way to go, and you're all dedicated and committed people to this agenda. So please play your role. Play your role and make a difference. Make people see that there is a way to change, and make people see that there is another way of handling an issue. Not everything needs to be dealt with in hostility, with aggression, with a negative flair to it. Things, even the most difficult and challenging of situations, can be dealt with in a very nice way, and can be dealt with in a human way. And when we start doing that, it does make a difference. It does make a difference, and I say that again from experience, that when you listen to people and you are sincere and you are honest and you're fair with them, you will get that same level of response for them. And this is one of those areas. These women, in all aspects, whether they come to the courtroom, whether they are in their homes, whether they are in the shelters, they need to be given their space. They need that respect. They need to know that there is an entire system behind them, a system that they can count on, a system that will protect them, that will voice for them, and a system that will ensure that justice is always served to them. Of course, that is what is closest to my heart, is that justice is done in the end, and it is important to know that in order for justice to be done, it can't only be in the courtroom. There's an entire system outside, and that entire system has to work towards justice being done. The entire system has to work with you. Only then justice can be done. Otherwise, just taking an issue into a courtroom and expecting that justice will be done, it will be done at some level, but it will never be done at the ultimate level or in the manner that we would want to see it done. So the initiatives that we've taken at the High Court to improve the concept of gender sensitivity, our training programs, we've done a lot of training. We have the Gender-Based Violence Code. The bar, I'm happy to see, has now taken part in this initiative and has a committee, and they're doing their training programs, and that shows you the level of commitment that at least the stakeholders of this justice sector have, that they're willing to do their part. And we'd like people to join in. We'd like people to share their expertise with us. We'd like people to share their stories with us, because when you share stories, you realize you're not alone. When you share stories, you realize that there is a way forward, and there is a way to deal with these issues. So that's what we are all here to do. We are all here to see how are we going to move forward, what is that positive impact and that positive energy that we're going to do. So we don't become sad by the fact that we're not there on the map. We're not there, but we get energized by the fact that we are going to get there, and we're going to get there very soon, and we're going to get there working together. And we're going to get there through initiatives like this, through programs like this, which everyone should contribute to in some way or the other. Every single one of you has a voice, every single one of you can make a difference, and you should make a difference. And you start at home, and then you work your way around everything that touches your life. You make sure that whatever you do, wherever there is a gender involved, that you give that gender the space that it needs, and that you are the voice of that gender if that person needs help. So you don't necessarily have to do it yourself, but you can send them in the right direction. You can make sure they get help. You don't necessarily have to close your eyes and say, this is not for me to worry about. It also is important to know that, as I said earlier, attitudes are important. So when we respond to such issues, it's important to know how are we going to respond. In my experience, when you give a very loud and aggressive and commanding response, you don't necessarily get the response that you want. So sometimes it's necessary to also gauge where am I standing, where am I sitting, where and how am I going to get the kind of response I want, because at the end of the day that's what it's about. It's about creating sensitivity. So it's about creating that space, whatever works to create that space. And I say this again because when you pick up the newspaper, when you read the newspaper, somehow this has become like a video game, like a little something gone viral, another news in the newspaper, some woman has been abused, someone has been burned, someone has been raped. How many stories do you read about it every day? And how many times do you stop to think about it? And how long do you think about it? Or is it just another story and then you move on to the fashion page and then you move on to the social pages and that's it, that's all that it is. So we've been desensitized, all of us. It's not about just sensitizing people who we think are not sensitive enough. We've all been desensitized. We don't respond the way we should respond, and we have to develop a response mechanism. We have to look for ways to develop a response mechanism to see that we don't read so many stories, and when we do read those stories, we need to highlight the fact that there are too many stories, and we need to feel the pain of those people, because that's what it's all about. How else do we make a better tomorrow for the children, for our own country? How else do we improve things? This is what we do. We all play our part, and I'm happy to see that Anida has taken this initiative and has put together this conference, and that you've all had time to sit and talk about things that are important to each and every one of us. And important, I'm glad also to see that you've invited Rehmat here. He has a lot to share. He's one of the pioneer judges in this court, and I'm sure with time we'll see a lot more improvement. If you were to put cases together, you'll find that it's for the first time in a long time that gender-based violence crimes are being, full judgments are coming out, convictions are taking place. That's a starting point. That's a starting point, and that's a very important starting point, because it's very difficult to convince people. The judge's job is to write the judgment. The judge's job is not to tell people how to plead their case. It's very difficult to convince those people that come on, say what you have to say, and I will ensure that justice is done to you. So play your part. Make sure that people don't get scared. There is a courtroom where these problems can be dealt with, and will be dealt with in a very good way, in a very safe way, in a way where justice hopefully will be done. So I request all of you to play your parts. You have a long way to go. You have lots of ideas and initiatives. Put your positive energies together and help us improve it to such an extent that we can one day come here and talk about all the great achievements, and we can actually say that we are now examples in the world, or we are examples for some parts of the world, where we are able to show people how even a society such as us, even Muslim societies such as ourselves, it knows how to be fair, and we treat our women in a respectful manner, done at all costs. So I thank you very much. Thank you, Nida, for having me.